Konnichiwa! We're back with another Sega Mega Drive and Genesis video, but this time instead of looking at brand new games that you should go out and purchase now, we're going to be looking at 10 games that you should not buy for your Sega Genesis and Mega Drive. My name's Mike, and this is the Retro Gamer Boy Show. Now, we're used to seeing some of the best games that were ever released for Sega's 16-bit console, whether they were back in the 90s or even now in 2001, some of the brand new releases that are coming out for the Mega Drive and Genesis. But in this week's show, we're going to be looking at 10 of the worst games you can buy for the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis, and games that you should avoid at all costs if you value the money in your pocket. Now, before we get into this, I want you to pause the video, go down to the comments below and write down one game you think is going to be in this list of 10 games you shouldn't buy for Sega's 16-bit console. And while you're there, you might as well hit the thumbs up button as well.
You have just been invaded by Sega TV!
Now, talking about games good or bad is always subjective. Games that I may absolutely hate, you may love. They could be your most favourite game ever. Or it could be a game that I absolutely love and you completely despise. So this is my top 10 games that I don't think are worth your money. Now, you'll find no sports games in this top 10 because otherwise the top 10, let's be honest, would be full of sports games. There's no football games, golf games or racing games in this top 10. But what is in this top 10 is this, Fantasia. A Disney game. Now, generally Disney games have been fantastic, awesome gameplay, amazing graphics and brilliant sound. This has some good sound and some pretty good graphics, but the gameplay is frustrating as hell. Pixel perfect jumping, annoying enemies, terrible combat system. It's just a game that frustrates the hell out of me. If I had picked this up in the day, I would have traded it in straight away. I just can't stand this game. The next game could have been made by the exact same developer. It feels like Fantasia, but just with different clothes on, and that is Page Master. It has frustrating platform gameplay in it again, the graphics are mediocre, the sound isn't great, and to be honest, I don't even know why I put this one ahead of Fantasia. They probably sit arm in arm next to each other in one of the worst games to buy for the Sega Mega Drive, and definitely not worth your money. Carmen Sandiego really falls into that game that could be subjectively good or subjectively bad. For me, it's just not worth the money because it's predominantly a text-based game and a very slow text-based game. It's not particularly elegant in its execution and it's a bit clunky when it comes to the mechanics of the game. If you like your text-based strategy games, this might be a game for you, but for me, it's a game that probably won't get played again in my collection. Next up, we've got a big hitter. A game that's loved by millions and looked upon fondly within the Sega community. By some people. It's Altered Beast. Now, Altered Beast is one of the best early arcade conversions for the 16-bit console. But the game, I find, is just terrible. The director of the game focused too much on presentation, which is well documented, and actually avoided putting pretty much any gameplay into this game at all. He would obsess about the animation screens between transformations, rather than what the combat felt like or navigating the level. You pretty much just punch and jump and move forward in an extremely unsatisfying way. I kind of want to really love Altered Beast, but to be honest, I just really find it dull.
Rise from your grave.
The Sega Mega Drive officially had 3 first-person shooters shipped worldwide for the console, and there was also Duke Nukem that came out in Brazil. It just so happens that one game you should avoid buying for your Sega Mega Drive is one of these first-person shooters. And it's Corporation. Corporation here suffers from a lot of what I found terrible in the other games. Slow-paced, boring, clunky controls and mechanics. However, I did find a new lease of life with Corporation when I plug in my PlayStation 4 joypad through a converter and control the game. It feels a lot smoother with that D-pad. It feels almost like this should be a mouse game for the Mega Drive. But as most people don't play their Mega Drive with a PlayStation 4 joypad or don't have the mouse, this game has to go in there as a game that's just not worth you picking up for your collection. The first fighter to make it into our list of games that you shouldn't buy. And it is what it says it is. Balls. Now Balls bills itself as a true Virtua Fighter for the Sega Mega Drive, allowing players to pan around their characters as they're fighting in a realistic 3D simulation. But actually, it's just a dull run-of-the-mill fighting game with uninspiring characters and environments. The special moves are pretty useless and the gameplay is perplexing at times. This is quite a terrible fighter for the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis, but not the worst. The worst is our next game, Rise of the Robots. This game was trash when it was first released. I can remember going to the local shop all excited for Rise of the Robots. It got a huge amount of hype in the magazines for its graphics and seemingly amazing gameplay. But when you got your hands on it, you realised that this game was utter balls. Maybe that should have been the name for it. You can complete the game entirely by doing a low kick on any of the enemies. I can't get over how much this development team spent on creating this game and how terrible it turned out. Definitely not one worth picking up if you're thinking about collecting games for your Mega Drive or Genesis. We're into the top 3, and at number 3 we've got Steel Talons from Tengen. Now Steel Talons from Tengen has a ton of potential if it could run faster than 5 frames a second. This is one of those 3D polygonal games that came out on the Mega Drive but ran at a terrible frame rate, and Steel Talons has to be the worst of the lot. Several times during playing this game, I often couldn't figure out which one was the helicopter and which one was the mountain or the horizon. It is terrible visually, terrible from an audio point of view, and it takes you about 30 minutes just to do anything in this game with its 5 frames a second frame rate. At number 2, we've got Art Alive. Now Art Alive was produced and developed to compete with Mario Paint. The difference is, Mario Paint is a pretty decent art package for a console where you have to use a joypad to draw pixels on the screen. Art Alive isn't. In fact, it's the polar opposite. It's nothing more than a clip art program with some rudimentary drawing tools in it. It's a terrible game, and the developers knew it. They even gave you a clue by creating such a terrible front cover. Right, number 1. It's time to pause the video again and guess what my number 1 game is that you shouldn't waste your money on. I'll give you 2 clues. It's from EA and it's a platform game. It's Dark Castle. Now Dark Castle is one of the bizarrest games that I've ever played, and quite simply one of the most terrible games that I've ever played. It's a port from a game from back in the 80s, I think, or late 80s, early 90s, and it's just atrocious. The game's core mechanic seems to be that it makes you fail, then fail again, then succeed for about 2 seconds before killing and failing you again. The whole premise behind Dark Castle, where you have to learn by your mistakes, is completely flawed because they give you absolutely no time to get any sense of achievement or progression in this game. And once you do make some progression, it's just onto another boring, dull level that you have to navigate. I've never finished Dark Castle. To be honest, I can't figure out how you can finish Dark Castle, because any of the doors that you go through lead to any of the levels that you can play. There seems to be no sequence to this game whatsoever. Now, if you played Dark Castle, if it's one of your all-time favourite games, let me know in the comments. Also, let me know how you complete this game. So there we go, 10 games. 10 of the most frustrating, dull and ill-conceived titles to grace Sega's 16-bit console. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you love retro gaming, or you love Mega Drive and Sega gaming, then why not consider subscribing to the Retro Gamer Boy Show? You can do this by clicking on a button just below this video. We make brand new content and videos every single Monday. And so that you never miss a Retro Gamer Boy show, you can click on the little bell that's also just below this video. And if you can't wait until Monday, don't worry, we've got you covered. There's a huge back catalogue of retro gaming videos, 2 of which you can watch over here.